Let's now take you to the other side of the floor where Rise Mzansi's leader, Songezo Zibi, is currently speaking.
This election, better than any political party. The rest of them caught on later on. But we are the best posturing game. We understood that we need to establish a presence throughout South Africa. But I also want to say, beginning from scratch is hard. It is really hard. Unlike, for instance, a political party that is a breakaway, that moves its existing structures and simply in many ways carries on from where it left off. You've got to find activists, you've got to find the right kind of activists, they've got to understand the message, they've got to go out there and recruit people. And those people need to be the right people, and you start building the name of the organization. Therefore, we were modest in our expectations. And I think if you want to learn how to read these elections, and I will share some insights, which are not numbers. That is, if you look at all the new political parties, we've topped all of them, except MK. Because MK is a breakaway from the ANC. It moved en masse with several structures from the ANC. And I'll talk about MK in a short while. But if you look at all the new political parties, especially from the past year, we've finished in front of all of them. If you look at some of the existing political parties that were regarded as small political parties, we've overtaken some of them as well. And this is after only a year of existence. And we are still building, and we are still growing. And so it is important to look at our performance in perspective rather than look at it in terms of how you would measure the ANC and other political parties. This has always been a long-term mission for us. You cannot enter one election and expect to shoot the lights out from nothing, from having started with nothing. We knew that. And therefore, this performance, while it is not the number of seats we would have hoped to get, because I think we've been to enough of these briefings, you know what the big unexpected event in this election was, and the kind of impact it had on strong and much older political parties. The same has been true for us, in that because we were organizing in areas where the ANC is traditionally strong, we were also affected similarly to other political parties. And therefore, with everything taken into account, we are very proud that we are taking 2 MPs to the National Assembly, and we are more than likely to have a member of the provincial legislature in Gauteng. And I think after a year, it is important. Second last thing I want to say is that there are people who believed somehow that our campaign was only centered around Johannesburg, but we understood the kind of data that we need to look at. We did not expect, for instance, to win VDs outright because we are new. A lot of voters don't know us, but we wanted to have a creditable position where we finished second, we finished third in various voting districts. And those voting districts are diverse. Nguma in the Eastern Cape, Muzahil in the Eastern Cape, Cosmo City in the city of Johannesburg, Winterveld in Tshwane, Sikatane in Mpumalanga, Johannesburg's northern suburbs, and the city of Cape Town and areas of the city of Cape Town. Now, those are diverse geographically, and I can mention many, many others. The importance of this data is this. It enables us now to decide where, for instance, we're going to fight by-elections. Because before this election, we simply couldn't. The established political parties could work out where to focus their campaign, where to identify activists and make sure that they're strong. We didn't have the benefit of that data because we simply had not existed. The data, the experience of campaigning, the experience of being in the campaign itself and being part of politics is very good learnings for us. Finally, I want to say something about the kind of leaders and the kind of team that we have. I think, objectively speaking, even if I have to say so myself, we made a conscious decision that our premier candidates are not going to be celebrities. They're going to be highly capable young people. And I think if you look at all the debates that we've had, objectively, they won those debates, hands down, because they're brilliant, they're grounded, they know their stuff from every possible angle. That's really important for us to do in order to drive the message that a different future is possible. That is the first thing. The second thing is I want to thank our communication team. These guys have been absolutely amazing. Social media, media relations and so on, we chose to go for professionals and professionalism, rock up on time for interviews, make sure that our statements are clear, they're not nonsensical, and so on, and talk about issues that are editorially important so that you can get the coverage, because it's really important to voters. So we're very deliberate because we understood that we do not have the kind of money that buys primetime television ads, primetime radio ads. We didn't have big billboards on the N1 and all of the big Ns around the country because we simply couldn't afford them. So we chose a ground game, we chose postering, we chose to have excellent candidates. Finally, I want to thank all of you because our campaign would have been so known by so many people had we not had the kind of media coverage that we've had. I know you are pulled from all sides to cover every event, every day, and there was 1 million of them, but you did a fantastic job. So thank you very much to you as well. Thank you very much. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
We can take questions, sorry. And you just say your name and
my name is Kawalo Magolego from UFM. You know, Mr. Zibi, with a rhyming name, Oppenheimer money. Yes, and unquestioning press. I personally thought you were getting a lot of coverage
So
for
they're
a new
staying.
party. How did you go? How did you get it so wrong? And then tied to that, have you decided somehow in strategy that you're not going to do the stadium thing? Because it would seem that the parties that are campaigning via rallies, mass mobilization, seems to have done well, and everyone that has been doing small gatherings won small.
So let me dispel the last myth that you said. The ANC has lost big in this election. They had the biggest stadium rallies, isn't that so? The EFF has lost in absolute terms, both in terms of percentage, in terms of absolute voters, haven't they? They had the biggest stadium rallies, didn't they? They did, right? Stadiums are not an indication of how much support you've got. Otherwise, the ANC would have won this election. They didn't, they lost it. So what you are saying to me is objectively untrue. It's a perception, right? So that is the first thing. The second thing, if you look at that table, how do you measure success for a new political party that is not a breakaway, that does not have structures and is beginning from scratch, and finishes ahead of all the new parties, and finishes ahead of some established parties? The question I have for you, what would have been the appropriate thing? We don't have the kind of resources that the DA and all of these parties have. Like I said, look for all the billboards. You won't find one from Rise Mzansi because we couldn't afford them. Look for television ads in prime time. We didn't have them because we couldn't afford them. Look for various other measures of how campaigns spend on parties spend on campaigns. You will not find it. What we did, and we did astutely, were two things. One, we chose postering, because it's important for people to know that you exist and start asking the question, who are these guys? Right? Number one. Number two, you make sure that you are able to make political activities that are going to be interesting for journalists to cover, because they are interesting. Media coverage does not work on the basis of how big a political party is. It just does not work like that. It works in terms of how newsworthy an event is. And I want to say one final thing about stadium, because there is another political party that you guys do not question. It is number 3 in this election. It has been able to have large rallies with hundreds of buses. You guys are not interested in how they are able to do it because you are afraid. You are afraid of the threats that you're going to get and the violence that may be visited upon you. You are scared. You choose to ask us the question. When we had limited resources, we couldn't buy advertising, when we couldn't do all of these things. And frankly, I urge all of you not to participate in a witch hunt, which is unjustified, because there are many more political parties that had far wider resources than we did, and could afford a lot more than we did in this election. And I think if we are to be consistent in this conversation, we need to ask them too where they got their money. I'm happy to answer the question because we declare with the IEC, but I think it is wrong to choose a soft target for the purpose. Thank you.
Right, next question. Natasha.
Mr. Zibi, we've been hearing a lot of political parties raising their objections. There's now an extension at 6 p.m.
Yeah.
Do you think that with the discrepancies that were raised by various political parties, will this have any effect on the elections? And as we're actually speaking right now, the DA has released a statement saying that you must come clean on your murky funding.
I'm happy to deal with that question. I've got receipts for them, and let's go. So let me first talk about the IEC, basically. So I think there is general consensus that based on its own previous performance, the IEC's performance in this election was below par. My own experience as a voter was terrible compared to previous elections, and I voted in the same voting station since 2006, since the 2006 local government elections. And the experience that I had has been below par. We have filed several complaints ourselves with the IEC because there are discrepancies in the performance of some of the voting stations. We do not, however, question the overall outcome of the election. We think it is important. We think it is important that the IEC does two things. One, it clears up areas where there are discrepancies. They don't sweep them under the carpet because clearly there were problems. If they don't, they give an opportunity to people with a nefarious agenda who are going to say the entire election was illegitimate. There are crazy instances where someone like my mother had to go and vote 40 kilometers away from where she lives and from where she is registered. Bantu Olumesa had to go and vote somewhere else, not where he has voted before. There were places where we had 180 national votes, 130 provincial votes, and 0 regional votes, even though our own party agents voted in the same voting station. Surely, this cannot continue, right? The IEC needs to clear up these issues so that people can have confidence in the overall outcome of the election. I've seen the DA statement. My response to them is, I hope they can manage the vindictiveness, because if we apply a consistent standard, the same people that it has declared, also their sources of income are unknown, first of all. I also know DA donors whose names do not appear on the IEC list. If they want to continue the childishness, they can continue. It's going to deal with them later on, and it will not be comfortable. The second thing I want to say is that we made certain that from all our donors, two things happen. One, we comply with the Electoral Funding Act. The donor complies with the Electoral Funding Act. If the DA has an issue, they must raise it with the IEC and point exactly what is unlawful about the declarations we've done. If you look at the results in terms of the areas where we overperformed, you will get an idea of why the DA for the last 7 to 8 weeks have been going for us over and above the ANC and every other political party. They are upset with us that we had the audacity to reject the Moonshot Coalition, because they believe black people should always be under the mentorship of a political party like theirs, because we are not fit enough, we are not smart enough to stand on our own and run a campaign. And if you look at the parties that joined the Moonshot Coalition, they have been eaten by the DA. That is number one. And we rejected it for that reason. Secondly, they appeared to have been offended that we dared to point out their governance failures in the Western Cape. When people who live in shacks that look no better than chicken coops in the rural areas feel they need somebody to represent them too, they are upset and offended because of that, because we refuse to allow them to be our masters. But if they continue their vindictiveness, it's going to deal with them later.